Welcome to Legends in Leadership, brought to you by ISF and the Carrington Group. Legends in Leadership is an inspirational podcast featuring the stories of leaders who are making a difference. Our goal is to inspire you with the stories of leaders who come from humble beginnings, overcome challenges, and ultimately rise up to make a difference in people's lives.
Welcome back to Legends in Leadership. My name is Jason Smith. I'm a family officer with the Carrington Group, and joined today by my two co-hosts, Dr. Blair Ritchie, Executive Director of the International Student Foundation, and Tyler Tallman, one of my partners and family officers with the Carrington Group. So welcome back, guys.
I'm a lot better looking than that guy.
It's Kyle.
Oh my gosh,
Hey,
that is awful.
good to meet you.
Habits are a hard thing to break. I guess.
Yeah, we ditched Tyler
Kyle
this week.
Watkins joining us today from the
We
Carrington
wanted
Group.
Kyle this week.
Well, what a way to start off.
There you go.
Let me turn it over to Blair for leadership trivia and see if he can do a better job.
Oh, man, absolutely. Well, today I think our guest is one of the most delightful personalities in media that we've had in the Dallas area. So I thought I'd test your knowledge of one of the legendary leaders in the history of media. You ready for this? All right. So without this Nobel Prize winning physicist and inventor, we probably wouldn't even be on the air today. He was born to a wealthy family in Bologna, Italy. As a schoolboy, he was fascinated with science, electricity, and dreamed of a world where wireless communication would connect people on a global scale. On this very day, December 12th, 118 years ago, he sent the first wireless message across the Atlantic Ocean from Cornwall, England, to a military base in Newfoundland. This leader was also a very effective entrepreneur, adept at getting the right people to invest in his wireless technology. He was instrumental in the founding of the British Broadcasting Company. So who is this legendary leader of radio and radar? I'll be back at the end of today's program with the answer. Well, our last guest boarded it out right away, so you got to wait to the end.
Create some suspense here. Well, we're excited to welcome our guest today, Kate Delaney. She is an award-winning journalist, speaker, and author. She's interviewed thousands of people, including U.S. presidents, Fortune 500 CEOs, and Hall of Fame athletes. Kate has served as a keynote speaker and consultant for companies such as Deloitte, Cisco, Forbes, UPS, Kraft, and many more. She also gave a TED-style talk at the Forbes Insiders Summit. Her keynotes and deeper dive workshops have been described as inspirational, engaging, funny, and filled with implementable content. It took 500 rejections, but she shattered the glass ceiling and became one of the first women to ever host a solo syndicated sports talk show. Kate's hosted shows on the NBC Sports Radio Network and the #1 rated station in the country, WFAN, in New York City, and in Dallas on KRLD. Currently, her nationally syndicated radio show is heard by more than 3 million people. As the SVP of Sales and COO of a broadcast network, she closed deals in the millions. She's the author of 3 popular books, including her latest book published by Forbes, Deal Your Own Destiny, as well as Increasing Your Odds, Win Big, and Become Extraordinary. The popular book has been described as a quick and impactful read for anyone seeking to make life or career changes. Kate is the past president of the National Speakers Association in Dallas, and she's most proud of the work that she's done with Children International since 2005, where she helps several families in Ecuador and around the world. Fun fact about Kate, she has 7 hole-in-ones in mini golf.
Wow.
So welcome to the show, Kate. We're very excited to have you.
Oh, Jason, after you read that, I'm exhausted. Can I go?
Well, I'm curious about starting back maybe from some of the inspirational moments early in your life that began to form this will to succeed and take 500 rejections. So as a child, how do you develop thick enough skin to overcome something like that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I haven't thought about that much, but recently a lot of people are asking me that question. And I would say that I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and my grandfather was one of those guys that, don't tell me about it, just do it, Catherine. And, you know, it's interesting to make the joke about golf, because I am a golfer. I say I'm a hacker, and that's why I make the joke about the 7 holes in one. He had 7 holes in one. And he said he would never play golf with me until I was good enough to play on a real course. So I was always striving to do that. And he'd tell me, practice, 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 and don't give up. And that's exactly what I did. And I think he instilled that in me, that nothing comes easy. You got to work for it. And every single time I stumbled, he was always there to remind me about that don't complain and whine to me. You know, here's what you need to do. And so he was really my mentor, my first mentor, and he was an inspiration to me. I mean, I used to play tennis. I played high school tennis, and he would come out to the match, and, you know, I'm looking for the warm and fuzzy to tell me, you're great, you're amazing, even when I just missed, 10 overheads. But no, he didn't do that. He's like, you need to practice more. So I think that tenacity and I had the drive, that was really instilled in my relationship with him.
Yeah, so what was his background? Where did he kind of develop that?
This is good because he was a super smart guy. I think in his lifetime he read like 40,000 books, but he grew up in an era where he had 5 brothers and sisters, and they needed him. He got a scholarship to go to college, but they needed him to bring in the bacon. So he started off becoming a truck driver just to get as much money as he could and see the world and send it back and all of that. And then he ended up being the GM of B&L Motor Freight, and they dealt with Owens Corning. So he still managed to take those skills that he had and then transfer that into a leadership role. So from the cab of a truck all the way to with humble beginnings into a leadership role. So I like to say when I'm on the air, you mentioned my show, I always say granddaughter of a trucker, and if you call in and you honk your air horn, I'll send you a copy of my tip book. And I get guys that'll call in and they'll do that.
So it's amazing to be able to relate to so many different people, and so how have you used that as you've grown your audience and your speakers and authorships?
Well, I like to think I realized, when you look back, like what are my skills? And I realized that I feel like I'm a bridge. I'm a connector. I really like people. We live in a world, that person, they're grumpy, they're this or whatever. But I like people. I like hearing their stories, and I always have, even when I was a kid. So because of that, I feel like whether I'm having a conversation with the Queen of England or a truck driver, I can find that nugget. I can relate to them, and I can make them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the key. So in interviewing, you want to get to their story. You want to share those nuggets of whatever it is they know, that knowledge that somebody else can hear and use. And that's whether I'm speaking on a stage with a microphone or I'm behind the microphone on the air. That's always my goal, is that I want the people that are out there to walk away with something.
So you had some early sports interests as an athlete yourself. How far did you take that?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I have trivia. Well, I'm not going to dump this on you because if you answered this question, I'd have to buy you all lunch. But I had an uncle who played pro hockey. He played for the Philadelphia Flyers, and they won the Stanley Cup back-to-back. And I was really young when they did that.
Bobby Clark.
Very close.
Oh,
Bobby Clark. That's great, Blair. That's great that you got that.
I just want lunch.
That's amazing. Wow, that's amazing. Bobby Clark actually taught me how to skate, but my uncle was Bernie Perron.
Oh my gosh.
The goaltender. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, whoa.
Right. So I didn't realize it, but I think because of that influence, I had 2 cousins that were involved in horse racing, and my Uncle Joe was a jockey. And there was a horse named Smarty Jones who almost won the Triple Crown. That's my cousin John. So I had this sort of in my background, and I think I liked competition and all of that besides being athletic. And that really, I really think that fired up my interest in sports.
Yeah. So from an early age, you're interested in sports, you're surrounded by it, you're engaged with it. Do you remember a time when you realized there was going to be some resistance for you to carry out this opportunity?
Because remember, I told you about my grandfather. So I didn't think like that. I didn't think, well, I'm a woman and that's a man's domain.
Right.
I didn't think that. I thought I could do whatever I set out to do as long as I worked hard at it and kept going. So I was surprised when I met the resistance. What happened, I was in California and I was a television anchor. And the sports guy, he said to me, I think you know more about sports than I do. And I need 3 days off, and I'm going to beg the news director to let you fill in. Well, of course, he had a gorgeous girlfriend that he wanted to get engaged to, so he did have some real reasons to do that.
Right.
But the news director really didn't want me to do it, but they said, okay, you'll be fine, you do it. So that's what happened. And once I started to fill in, I realized, oh, this is definitely one of the roads that I should go down. And I thought it would be easy. I thought I put together a good tape. You know, my voice was good. You look good on camera or whatever it is, and just reach out and start calling news directors and send them your stuff. And eventually someone picks it up. But I got rejection after rejection. And I finally got, I don't know what number it was, 300 something, where a guy said to me, and it's in my book, he said, you are attractive. You are good at what you do. I love your voice. Women don't belong in the locker room. Women are more suited for easy breezy morning shows. Well, you know that scene from The Mask where Jim Carrey's head spins around? My head pretty much spun around like that. I think I scared all the dogs in the neighborhood. And I knew, oh, I'm not going to, because my family wanted me to go into law or become an investment banker, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. And I had taken the law entrance exam, but I thought, I'm not giving up. No matter what it takes, I'm going to cross over. And that just fueled me, I think, more. And then finally it happened. I got a break, and then the rest was history.
So how were you received by the athletes and the sports community outside of these barriers?
You know, the athletes, if you know your stuff, and I traveled with the Dallas Cowboys, and it was at the tail end of the Aikman, Michael, Emmett era, and everyone else in between. And as long as you knew your stuff and asked the right questions, and I say right questions, not stupid questions like you had no idea what was going on, I never had problems with athletes.
Yeah.
They were respectful of me. If anything, I think a lot of them were cheering me on. So that wasn't the issue. The issue was always the gatekeeper. So there were men that helped me. It's not male bashing for me, because lots of men, they would stay late. They would help cut the resume tapes that I was doing, but they weren't the gatekeeper. And the gatekeepers, what do they want to know? That you can get ratings. Will men really watch a woman? And then especially you get into radio, because it's different when you're doing television. Radio, you are the attraction. You are filling that time.
Right.
So now you got to get men to listen to your opinions on the NFL, on Major League Baseball, on all the crazy controversy,
For
on
its
the
actual
NBA.
content. You know, there's no highlight reel or distraction.
Oh, no. There's no one to throw to, especially I was solo. So it's just me. There's nobody bouncing off of me or any of that. It's callers, me, guests, whatever fun thing I came up with, however I could move the needle. And that's how I just rolled with it, and I felt confident.
So of all these different events, I mean, horse racing, Triple Crowns, Super Bowls, NCAA championships. So Final Fours, what has been, I mean, for you, the most enjoyable to get to cover? Because all those are, I mean, bucket list items.
Right.
And you've been able to do all this. So for you, personally, what is the most enjoyable one of those for you?
That's such a hard question, because I liked every single one. I mean, I loved broadcasting from the Super Bowl. I used to be the sports director at KRLD and set up how we covered the Rangers, and I would go to spring training. I knew all the guys, and I covered the Yankees, I mean, World Series. I could, go on and on, as you mentioned some of them, Kyle, but that's just so tough. I'll tell you what, to me, it's always the biggest events, right? So it's the biggest ones, because you're there for some of the things in between. But when you get with a team or that you're covering, or it's somebody you know, and you're there at a World Series, you're there at the Super Bowl, that I think is magnified, and that becomes, even bigger. The Super Bowl where the Giants, remember the Giants and the Patriots and David Tyree and the helmet catch? That was a wild one, because it had that dramatic finish.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I like the big finishes. So to me, that was, stupendous to be at that one. And I used to travel with the Cowboys, like I said. Now, how many times did I mention that? But I was in Philadelphia, and remember, I'm from Philly, so the guys used to tease me about that. They'd say, "Who are you rooting for?" I'm like, what kind of question is that?
Right.
I'm married a Texan. I'm all about Dallas.
Independent observer. Let's go with that.
There you go.
Exactly. And I was there when Michael Irvin got hurt. I was there when the batteries were being thrown and that kind of stuff. And Here's kind of a funny thing. This is what we call inside baseball. So I'm traveling with the team, and there's only a handful of us. John Radigan was another that was also traveling, because they only media had a few seats, and writers, they don't want to be tainted, so no writer is going to be on that plane. So we get there, we get to Philadelphia, and the television guys, all of them, so Fox and CBS and NBC, they said to me, don't you have some brothers or friends or whatever? Will they be grips for us? And you just have to tell them they cannot cheer for the Philadelphia Eagles on the sidelines. They're going to be in the locker room. So my brother was a new lawyer, and they were all young lawyers and 20-something. And I asked them, and their eyeballs were just huge, like moon pies. You're going to get a press pass. You can be with me. You'll be on the sideline. You'll be in the locker room. But you cannot cheer for the Philadelphia Eagles. And so you could see them. They'd be there holding the mic, and they just wanted to cheer when they scored. And it was just so funny to see these big guys, all of a sudden like little kids running around the locker room. Because how do you get to cover that? Right. And you're not in the media, and you're not in the sports world. You're an attorney in Philadelphia or New Jersey. And they just talked about that forever. And I saw them high-fiving some of those Dallas Cowboys, and trust me, I told everybody.
Some of those hardcore rivalries start to wash away when you're in front of, the top tier athletes.
Absolutely.
Just respect for who they are and what they're accomplishing.
Yeah, that's true.
So who in your mind sticks out as some of the folks you've admired throughout your journey, and maybe even outside of the sports world, who's just maybe risen above the cut in your mind as someone who's just been really inspirational?
Wow, I would say there's a lot of people. I only had just a tiny conversation with him, but Bill Gates. And now people are watching the documentary about him, and they're getting more of a sense of what he's done. Because I think it used to be when you don't know, he grew up with money, and that was so easy. No, he created something that was absolutely amazing. And he still gives back to the world, because you see what he's doing with water. He doesn't have to do that. It's easy to write a big check to charity and not be involved, but he and Melinda are involved in that. And the conversation, the little conversation I had with him was about that. And this is another business person, but Forbes did my book, and I met Steve Forbes. And just kind of like the locker room where a lot of guys are, the Steve Forbes, and maybe because again I'm like that bridge. I'm not intimidated by people that maybe have a big name, and so I was doing a show, a live show, and there was a guy that was with me, and everybody was afraid to go up to him. I just went right up to him and I said, "Hey, Steve." I introduced myself. Do you have a few minutes? He said, "Absolutely." Yeah. Then he sat down. He asked me about me, and he said, "We need to do your book." Next thing you know, I got a call from Forbes. They did the book.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So see, there's something about that, right? And leaders know that, and even people that want to get into those positions, you have to ask. People don't ask the question. I always say that it's like when you're a kid in school, and nobody wants to raise their hand because they're embarrassed. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong answer. Instead of just, hey, let me just take a crack at it. Like we have the big hard question that was asked, the trivia question by Blair at the top of the show. How many people raised their hand? And I guess I wasn't afraid to do that. So anyway, interviewing him was great. He talked about his father, Malcolm, and him taking them to farms and teaching them how to be humble and milk cows and all these things. Yeah. And it was really, really interesting.
And it's enjoyable, too, to get more of those long-form interviews, rather than the sound bites and sound clips.
Yes.
Describe a little bit on your show how you're trying to dig a little bit below the surface and bring some of those stories.
Well, so because of the years of doing this, whether it's athletes or whether it's business people, because I do a Forbes business segment, I'll reach out to who I think is making an impact somewhere, somehow. It might not even be directly in their business. It might be what they're doing philanthropically. And what I do is when I talk to them, I ask deeper questions. So I'm not just asking the who, what, where, when. I'm asking them, what keeps them up at night? Okay. What keeps them up at night? What would they have done a little bit differently if we re-racked? And I know what the situation is, 10 years ago to XYZ. And I feel like if you can get personal with somebody too, and you know something about them, that they'll open up to you and they'll tell you something maybe they never told anyone before because they know that you've dug a little bit deeper. It's like I've interviewed a lot of actors, and they get the same questions over and over again. And of course, they don't necessarily like it, but they know they have to do those publicity junkets.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Kira Sedgwick is married to Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon comes from royalty in a sense in the architecture world. His father practically built all the skyscrapers in downtown Philadelphia, and that's her father-in-law. And I knew that, and growing up there, of course, I asked her the other questions, and I said that, and she was so just taken aback that I knew that. She said, next time you're in Los Angeles, and why don't you come by the set, and I'd like to have coffee with you. I'm like, you bet. Can I do it now? I'm going to the airport right this second. You better be serious about this. Yeah. So there was more to her than just being an actress, and more to him. He's even a musician.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about, here's all you've been nominated for this and you did that. And so if you dig deeper and do a little research, and of course now we don't have a lot of excuses because the internet has everything mostly out there. Mm-hmm. But the more you dig, and I think the more you connect personally, the better information you get in an interview, the surprise information.
So as you're rubbing shoulders with leaders, both sports and business, talk a little bit about what are some of the issues you're dealing with? What are some of the ways that you feel that you're impacting their development? What are some of the maybe hot buttons that some of our listeners might be tuning in to in terms of leadership lessons and things like that are really on the cutting edge for you?
Well, what's really interesting about athletes and business leaders, no matter what level they're at, whether they're rookies and emerging leaders, whether they're a CEO or somewhere else, in the C-suite level, one thing that all of them have in common, men and women, by the way, they all have coaches. They have the mindset of trying to get better. It doesn't matter that I'm LeBron James and I'm sitting on a pile of cash and everybody wants me and I have all these endorsements. I want bigger, better next. What can I do? And the bigger I grow, how can I impact society? And that's the other common denominator is, it's your show, Legends in Leadership. Well, what is ultimately the other L, your legacy? And so legacy is the other part of being a good leader, I think, because legacy of who's coming up and what are you leaving behind, whether it's your own company or it's a company that you're involved with, who are the people that are coming up behind and how much do you care and know about them, what is the growth there, and then also your own personal legacy, whatever that might be. What's your impact? And athletes care about that, again, men and women, and so do business leaders. And that's the common bridge for both. So they have the growth mindset and also what am I leaving behind mindset. And if they don't have that, by the way, usually something's off. I mean, I can go down the list of bad guys. We know them.
Yeah.
But usually that's what it is. When you know more about them, you find out that it was more fraudulent what they were trying to push to people. If it was convenient to say, I work with children, or I work in the art world on the side, and I donate this and this, that's what they did. It wasn't heartfelt.
Right.
We keep coming back in the discovery of leadership. The theme of humility keeps coming back to us. It's kind of fascinating because when you think of some of at least the high-profile people, you don't think of humility on that. And you just highlighted that willingness to say, I need to grow, to I need a coach. Those are humility statements that aren't, who am I? I don't need a coach. I can do it all myself. So it just fascinates me about how humility becomes a mark of great leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit on the golden nugget for sure, Blair, because then you're opening yourself up to whatever the possibilities are. You're more flexible. One of the things that, and I talk about this sometimes, transformational leadership. Companies will hire me to come and do maybe one of their main stage keynotes, whatever it is, or a deeper dive in the company. And transformational leadership is that, is having the humility to listen also and be involved with the people a layer below. Because we talk about change. Change is a thing. Oh, do you talk about change, and how do we change, and how do we do that? But most people are resistant to change because we want to keep it the same way. Ooh, I'm afraid. I don't want to lose what I think is going to be the bonus. I don't want to lose X, Y, Z. But the people who are flexible, the leaders who are flexible, are usually the ones who end up having the most growth and do make the most for shareholders, for example, if they're a public company. And if they're a private company, they see their clients just blossom. And I call it attracting raving fans. How do you attract raving fans and move somebody from a spectator to somebody who's involved?
So for your keynote and some of the other trainings and things that you're doing that as that's evolved out of your broadcast career, tell us a little bit more about what that looks like for those corporate or other organizations that are bringing you in.
Sure. So it can be, for example, it can be what I mentioned. It can be attracting raving fans. How do you do that for bigger, badder connections, not just for today, but for tomorrow? Because we know it is word of mouth, right? How do you become buzzworthy? You can spend all the amount of money you want on marketing, but you still have to have people sing your praises and spread that, and the people that work for you too. So it's the people inside the company, it's the people outside of it. And I talk about that, and I talk about how can you leverage traditional media with social media.
Okay.
What happens with a lot of people, they'll have events and they'll say, oh yeah, we have social media, and hashtag it, growth leadership 2020. And
Who
I'll
knows
say,
to search for that, though?
Well, exactly. And then what usually happens is they put up a few cool pictures, and then that's it. Oh, great, we put up some pictures. But you didn't do anything before the event. You didn't do anything during the event, and you didn't do it after. How come you're not leveraging? How do you leverage after the event? And I think that's where the real gold is, too. Keeping people interested in what they heard.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'm the closing keynote, and I love that because then I can be the summarizer. I always tell them I want to go see some, and they're always shocked by that. Hey, I want to go see some of your other keynotes. Well, of course, you can come to our, usually someone like you just comes in and they think I have a helicopter. They'll just helicopter in and then you swoop in and then you
drop
leave.
your knowledge
I'm like,
and leave.
No. I want to be involved. I want to hear what's going on in the industry. And then I'll pick up those nuggets and wrap it back around in the closing keynote. So if you're sitting there and you're tired, you've had all this information, you leave with some great takeaways that you can implement instead of being passive, instead of being a spectator. Because I'm telling you, I've done it. I've done the reconnaissance. You walk around in some of these big conferences and you see it, sleepy-eyed, doing anything else, just not paying attention. And can you blame them? Because there's no involvement, there's no interactivity, it's not engaging, it's not compelling.
Right.
And that's always my goal. What's compelling and what can you walk away with? Whatever it is. So I speak a lot in the banking industry, a lot in the financial industry, credit unions even, which of course they're enemies, but for different reasons. And just in other corporate environments, oil and gas is another one. Tourism, that's big for me. I do a lot of the governors' conferences. The governors of each of each state have a conference because tourism is big everywhere. So how do you attract people to Savannah, Georgia versus Dallas, Texas? How do you attract people to Fort Worth versus every other place in Texas and bordering Texas? What are you offering? And that's big bucks. That's big money.
It is.
The CVBs, what are they designed to do? To bring people into the area, to go to the restaurants, the hotels, the attractions, and whatever else you're offering.
Yeah.
So you've been doing what you've been doing long enough to make this a relevant question. How do you stay fresh? What do you do to just stay current and fresh?
I'm a voracious reader, and of course with my interviewing skills, chops, whatever, I'll call somebody up, a leader, if I'm speaking of whatever industry it's in, and I'll be up on what it is they're not doing, what do they need to keep doing. I find out, I dig deeper, what do they need to keep doing, what do they need to get rid of, and what do they need to start doing. And I'll look for the relevant people and connect with them and interview them. And sometimes it ends up somewhere, but sometimes it's just for me, or just have a conversation with them. And I'm always reaching and trying to grow that and find out what do people not know and what kind of trend will help them, and what can they find out. And like I said, I read everything, whether it's financial, whether it's IBD or Wall Street Journal, or name it. Of course, Forbes. I have to say that.
Right.
And anything else from Bloomberg, etc.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to highlight your philanthropic efforts and the work that you're doing with children, and tell us a little about how you got involved and the mission that you're involved with to help children.
It was through a radio thing, maybe 14 years ago, and it's called Children International. And what they came to me and they said, would you be interested in what we do? And we do it here in the United States, but a lot of it's overseas. It's in Asia, it's in Central America, it's all over the place. And these kids have nothing. They don't have any kind of government assistance in most of these places. And so they talked to me a lot about it, and I wanted to know where the money went. Because if the majority of the money isn't going to help the projects, I didn't really want to be involved in it. But they assured me of that. They showed me the financials, all of it. And I got involved, and then I actually... it's like adopting. You're adopting a child because that money that you're paying is directly. They wouldn't have school books. They wouldn't be educated in any way if they didn't get something. And then I ended up doing a documentary. It took me down to Guatemala. Or not Guatemala. I did go to Guatemala, but they took me to Ecuador, to Guayaquil. And when I was in Guayaquil, I really saw how it was. It was the haves and the have-nots completely. You'd go into these barrios, and Jose is one of the kids that I got involved with. He was I want to say 10 when we first started, and he was so excited to see me. And I took him to McDonald's and brought him some soccer balls and mattresses, and they were just overwhelmed.
Wow.
And he just couldn't wait to show me his report cards. I had to climb up a little ladder. They had a dirt floor and a stove, but everything was dirt, the dirt floor, and climbing up. And they had, his mother, the two boys had mattresses, and that's what they had, and it just crushed me to see. But it also inspired me to realize they're just happy. They don't know that they don't have everything else. And all the families want is for them to get educated because they think that's the way out.
Okay.
And they could have a better life. And so because the money directly went to the children, I got involved, and it's just been a
Very
blessing.
powerful, yeah.
Very powerful for me. And I've seen the impact, and it's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So where can folks find out more about you?
Of course, I have 100 websites, just like everybody else in America. You can go to KateDelaneyRadio.com for anything that has to deal with broadcasting, or you can go to DealYourOwnDestiny.com, and that will tell you more about my speaking.
Great. Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for taking time to visit with us.
Thanks. It's been great being here, guys. I love what you do.
Let's see Dr. Blair summarize our trivia.
All right,
and see
so the leader of radar and radio.
if, give it a try.
You want to give it a try?
Marconi.
You got it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Guglielmo Marconi, who reflected on his life's work by asking one of the great questions of all time. Have I done the world good, or have I added a menace?
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm thinking every parent should ask that question. Right? Have I done the world good, or have I added a menace?
Well, folks, that's a wrap for our show today. And on behalf of my co-host, Kyle Watkins, and Dr. Blair Ritchie, I want to wish you a good day. And remember this, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader.
Legends in Leadership is brought to you by the Carrington Group. Carrington Group is a family office with a passion for helping business leaders and their families make smart choices and fulfill their highest aspirations. To learn more about the Carrington Group, visit their website at www.carringtonfo.com or Google Carrington Group Dallas, Texas. ISF is committed to leadership development for aged-out foster care and orphaned youth. ISF's mission is to transform these youth into tomorrow's leaders with scholarships, mentoring, and leadership training. To learn more about ISF, visit their website at isfsite.org or Google International Student Foundation to learn more.
Securities offered through Regulus Advisors, LLC. Member FINRA/SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Regal Investment Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors are affiliated entities. Carrington Group and this broadcast are independent of Regulus Advisors and Regal Investment Advisors.